much. So I'm Jamon Morgan, and with me is Morgan Lako. So Morgan is going to be doing live coding while I narrate. This is a little bit of an analogy for our day jobs, actually. Morgan is a mobile software engineer at Infinite Red, and I am CTO, so I talk. Cool. So Morgan, if you don't mind pulling up the slides that we created, and then I will go through those really quickly. Fun fact, we practiced for a 30-minute talk and could never get it below 45 minutes, and then I realized it's actually a 45-minute talk, so that's perfect. Okay, so our talk is Seamless GraphQL in Rails and React Native. Like I said, I'm Jamon Morgan. I do live in the Pacific Northwest. Really nice to be here right now and not there where it's cold and wet. I do work on, I am co-founder of Infinite Red and work on the React Native open source community core. And you can find me on Twitter at Jamon Morgan. Morgan?
I am Morgan Lako. I work at Infinite Red. I actually started with Rails at Code School, and then I went to Infinite Red and worked with Elixir at the beginning, and then they switcherooed me into mobile development with React Native.
And Morgan lives in Orlando.
Yeah, so stop making fun of Florida.
All right, so a little bit about Infinite Red. We are a consultancy. We do mobile and web design, React.js, React Native, which is what we're most known for. And we are starting to do some AI and machine learning projects as of January of this year. We just started doing that. So, all right. Morgan, do you have the latest? Because I'm seeing a little problem here. Thank you. Okay, that's better. Okay, and Chain React is our conference. It's a React Native focused conference in Portland. If you're into React Native, please do come and visit Portland in the summer. In July, it's great there. I hear it's a little warm here, so that's a good time to get out of the heat. And so the next one's going to be in July 2020, and you can find more about it at infinite.red/chainreactconf. Okay, cool. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different tools as we do our live coding exercise here. We're not going to touch any of them very deeply, and there's a lot more depth here, but I'll go through these very quickly. Number one is Rails. Who here has heard of Rails? Anybody heard of Rails? Okay, a few of you. No, I won't talk about that too much because I know there are a lot of Rails developers here. GraphQL Ruby. Has anybody used GraphQL Ruby? Okay, actually a fair number. GraphQL Ruby is a gem. It'll be providing our Rails generators and the GraphQL endpoint that we're going to be using. We are going to be generating a GraphQL schema. That's kind of one of the points of this talk, is to show how you can have one schema between your backend and your mobile app, or you can totally translate this to the web as well. I'm doing a mobile app to show kind of the extreme of it, but you can also do this on a web front end. We're going to be using a tool called MSTGQL, I'll talk about that more in a bit, to generate our MobX state tree models from the GraphQL schema, which brings me to number 5, MobX state tree. Think of MobX state tree as being Redux, like state management, but just a little better in some ways. So we used Redux for several years at Infinite Red, and we kind of got tired of the boilerplate and a few other things. And MobX State Tree is probably the most popular alternative to Redux that you're going to find out there. Uses a system called MobX under the hood, and but provides more of a Redux style pattern over the top of it. We'll also be using React Native with our starter kit Ignite Browser, which is a boilerplate for React Native. Sort of brings you maybe about 2 weeks. It kind of fast forwards you about 2 weeks into into your project. So. We'll be starting with pretty much brand new Ignite Browser. We haven't really touched it much, mainly just kind of made sure that all of our dependencies have been installed. Go ahead and go to the next one, Morgan. Cool. And so this is what we're building. Morgan, you want to talk?
Yes, we're just building a simple demo to demonstrate taking an API and using GraphQL to consume that on a React Native client. pretty much describes it, I think.
Yep. Perfect. We're going to keep it pretty simple here because we only have 45 minutes. All right. So we are doing live coding, and go to the next screen really quick. So because we're introducing so many tools, I want you, if you have a mobile phone or if you're on your laptop, you can either go to git.io/J lower EC capital EO, that's an O, not a 0. I think if you do 0, it'll go somewhere completely different. Or you can just scan that QR code, and it'll bring you to a README. And this README is literally what we are going to be following. Morgan and I wrote it, and you can actually follow it as well yourself. So this is all open source, and you can follow along. This is actually, we're going to do our best to explain what's going on as we go through the code, but I want to make sure that if people want to kind of spend a little more time on something as we're moving forward, you can. So just a couple more seconds here, git.io/J lower EC capital E capital O, and that will bring you to the GitHub repo. All right, let's do the demo. Okay, so on our left, we're going to have our Rails app. It's just a brand new Rails 6.0, fresh, like totally fresh. I think actually we've done one little thing with it. We've just added one gem. On the right is a fresh Ignite Browser React Native app. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to add the GraphQL Ruby gem. So go ahead and open up VS Code here. And we are going to make sure that we have the GraphQL gem installed, which we actually do already, just so that we don't have to download on hotel Wi-Fi. And so let's go back to our terminal and run a generator that comes with GraphQL Ruby gem, railsg GraphQL install. So this just brings in a whole bunch of files that you need in order to work with a GraphQL endpoint and schema. There you go, a bunch of stuff. We're also going to create a little scaffold. So a lot of Rails developers don't really use scaffolds, but they're good for demos. And so let's use railsg scaffold. You can see that at the bottom. Maybe can you Command K that or something so you can get perfect. Post, and we are going to give it two attributes: a title, which is a string, and a body, which is also a string. And then we'll run Rails DB migrate. Cool. So this creates just like a post model and some basic views for editing or creating and editing and deleting posts. And we are going to now create the corresponding GraphQL object. So railsg GraphQL object, and then capital post. There we go. And then we do have to give it the same attributes. So a title, which is a string, or sorry, an ID, which is an ID. Thank you. And title, which is a string, capital string on this one. Body, which is also a string.
I think there's some type of GraphQL. Oh, good catch.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that was a good eye there. Yeah. GraphQL, perfect. Live coding. All right. So this will generate a post-type.rb file. Let's go ahead and look at that really quickly. And that's in our GraphQL folder, which was created for us. And we just go to the post-type.rb. And this looks familiar. We have three fields. We have an ID, a title, a body, and they have the type information built in. Now what we want to do is go to our query type.rb. So this is where we tell GraphQL what types of query that you can run against your GraphQL endpoint, and then also hook it up to that post object, the model that we created earlier. So let's go ahead and Morgan, let's just go ahead and copy and paste that in, and then I will go ahead and explain what's going on here. So we will be copying and pasting in the interest of time, but I'll explain everything. Also to avoid some typos. Cool. So the posts field defines what it is that we are returning back. So we are returning back an array of posts, post type, and gives it a description, and then we actually implement it using just a regular method, def posts, and then post.all. If you've done Rails active record, this is just an active record request that returns back all of the posts. We could do something like sort them or filter them based on arguments. We're not going to do that right now, but this is the most basic thing that you can do. We just want all the posts. So with that, let's go ahead and run Rails server and go to localhost 3000/posts. Already running. We'll just restart it here. And localhost 3000, and we're going to go to the /posts.
Pet your dog.
Perfect. Create a new post, put something in there.
We didn't rehearse that.
We did not rehearse that. Very literal. Morgan, go ahead and create another one and put something else in there. Perfect. All right, we have a little bit of content. And now let's jump over to the GraphIQL. How do you say that, Morgan?
Graphical?
Graphical. Thank you very much. Graphical. I don't know. Yeah. All right, graphical. So this is a UI. It comes with the GraphQL Ruby gem that allows you to run queries against your endpoint and see what the response is. It's really, really helpful in development. One of the coolest things about GraphQL is the idea that they created this tool for doing this. So let's run an example query. Of course, the name of the field that we said, that we defined in the query type was posts, and then you have to give it a curly. And then as you can see over here, when you run it with Control-Enter, it gives you a data property that has posts, and again, it's an array of posts. Now, we're only getting the IDs back. That's not super useful to us, so we want to add a couple more fields. And as you can see here, there's even autocomplete in here, so it's very cool. You can then run it, and you get the data back. So this is one of the coolest things about GraphQL is that you can shape your data how you want it, how you need it. And you can only request the fields that you actually need. It makes for a much better experience on the front end, the people building the React Native app or mobile app, and allows you to move very quickly as a front end team. This is very important to us as at Infinite Red because while we used to do a ton of backend, now we're mostly working with other backend teams who may or may not be using Rails. And if they provide us with a REST API and it doesn't have a property that we need, we have to wait until they implement it. Where with GraphQL, you have a lot more control over that. Cool. Yes?
Actually, can you hold it? Because I need to type while I talk.
Perfect.
Okay. The thing I like about GraphQL a lot is that it's composable. So like if there was like authors on here, I could just do this and get like their name and stuff like that. And no one would have to go in and change the API to add authors to the endpoint. That's all.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this would, if we had a relationship that was called authors, it would just go in and grab it and grab just the name and return it. And if you do it right, it doesn't even do an n+1. It does it properly and returns the related data. We're not going to do that in this one, but it kind of shows you how you can do this. Cool. So we need to, now that we have, essentially our back end is done, at least for this first version. So we need to now implement in the front end the React Native Ignite Browser app the same schema so that we know how to query it, get the data back, use it within the app. And so we're going to do one more thing in the Rails app, and that's to create a rake task. And so if you do Rails G task GraphQL dump. So this is just another generator that comes with Rails that generates a task. And so this will create one file, and we're going to go into that file, which is in lib down here. Perfect. Tasks and GraphQL.rake. And let's just go ahead and copy and paste in from the README, and I'll explain what's going on here. So when we ran that first command, Rails G GraphQL install, it creates a new object, ACR Rails schema, and we are just saying .toDefinition. So this returns back a string that is the definition of our GraphQL schema. And then we're just writing it to acr.graphql. So we're just writing a file, okay? Pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and run that. Rake GraphQL:dump. And this is a really important step because as your backend grows, you're going to accrue more fields, you're going to accrue more models, you're going to accrue more mutations, which I'm going to talk about later. Basically, things that can change the data, whether it's deleting or adding or manipulating data. And so you need to get those things. You need to have one single source of truth. You don't want to be having to synchronize the schema between the front end and the back end. So we're just outputting the current. Let's go ahead and open up that file, GraphQL file, which is in the root. And this looks fairly familiar. We have type post. It has a body, ID, and title with the types, and also a query, which gives us back, the name of the query is posts, and it gives us back an array of posts. At the top, we have a mutation. We will be doing a mutation as part of this talk. Cool. We do need to do one more thing. Go to the GraphQL controller. So this controller is generated as part of the install process of the Rails G GraphQL install. And it has some stuff in here. You can definitely go and look through it and modify it however you want. But this basically sets up the endpoint. We have a bunch of stuff in here. I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but we do need to, because we're doing a mobile app, cross-site scripting is handled differently with mobile apps. It is not coming from the same domain, right? If you're on a website and you're coming from the same domain, then you're good, right? You can make a request back to the server and everything's good. With a mobile app, it's coming from the outside. It's not trusted at all. So what we need to put at the top here is protect from forgery with null session. We're basically just turning that protection off. If you do this, then of course you need to implement your own safety. We're not going to do that for the demo. But we do need to do this in order to talk from the React Native app back to the Rails server. All right, so we're pretty much done with the Rails app for now. We have our basic scaffolding, we have our GraphQL endpoint, we can query that endpoint, we can manipulate the response from that endpoint. This is all sounding great, but now we actually need to show this data, those very literal posts that Morgan created, in the React Native app. So Morgan, go ahead and pull up the React Native simulator, the iOS simulator. So this is what an Ignite Browser app looks like when you just generate it. So if you install Ignite, usually using npm or yarn or something like that, and you say Ignite new my app. This is what will be generated. And we're running this in the iOS simulator, but you could also run it in the Android emulator. So React Native is cross-platform. You can run it on both. And what Ignite is, just let me talk a little bit more about Ignite. We started doing React Native in 2015 when React Native for Android was released. And the thing that we noticed back then was there really weren't a set of best practices that we could follow. It was sort of like, here's an app.js file and make your own folders. This is not Rails where they say this is how you should do things. It was pretty wide open. So we looked around for some boilerplates and didn't really find anything that was too compelling to us. So we built our own called Ignite. Then we created a new one over time. We kind of refined our practices, and we created a new one called Andros. Pretty similar to the old one. This one was using Redux sagas, React navigation, a few other things like that. And then sort of staying with the video game villains theme, we went with Bowser as our second one. The next one's going to be Cyber Demon from Doom. But Bowser's the current one that we have. We've recently updated it with hooks and everything. If you click continue there, it has another screen. You can demo Reactatron, by the way. Rich Evans is here, and he's one of the primary maintainers, actually the primary maintainer of Reactatron. which is a desktop app. You can see it right here. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but it's a desktop app that allows you to inspect React Native apps. You can also use it on React. And Demo Reactatron, if you hit that, then it outputs it basically logs to this desktop app, and you can then inspect it, like click through and drill down and see some cool stuff. So, but yeah, this is what comes out of the box with Ignite Browser. But we're not going to mess with the second screen. We're just going to edit the welcome screen. We're going to display all the posts in this welcome screen. So, cool. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add a tool called mst-gql. And we're just going to copy and paste the run command here. It's basically yarn add mst-gql GraphQL request, which allows us to make requests to the Rails server, and also React DOM, which I think is actually something. Yes, on the right-hand side is our React Native app, so we're running that over there. And that's a dependency for something there. So essentially, MST-GQL brings in two things. One is it brings in some generators that take a GraphQL schema. It doesn't matter where it's from. It can be literally like a URL. You can bring in your schema from a URL or from a file, which we'll be doing. And then it generates from that a bunch of MobX state tree files. And what's really cool about this is it essentially takes what's in your GraphQL endpoint and tells your React Native app about it. Ignite Browser doesn't have any concept of GraphQL. Like, it's not built with GraphQL in mind, but MST-GQL hooks it up. Cool. And then the second, oh, by the way, the other thing is it comes with a runtime component that allows you to then, during the app, you can actually kick off requests. And we're actually going to be using a hook, a custom hook. So I'm really glad that Jake talked about hooks earlier, because that will kind of soften up the crowd a little bit toward hooks. But essentially, there's a custom hook that allows you to kick off queries to the server, and then when the data comes back, it refreshes the component and allows you to refresh anything where the data has changed. So we're running this command, MST, let's see, yes. So we're going to run a command, yarn mst-gql. If you're using npm, it'd be npm run, we're running a script. We're passing it some parameters, format as TypeScript. We are using TypeScript in this demo. It's similar to Flow, if you saw the notation earlier. We're not going to focus on it too much, but one cool thing about this is that we're also using the GraphQL schema to generate our TypeScript types. So we get all of our types from the schema. We're not having to recreate that. All right, so, and then we tell it where the GraphQL file schema lives, and we tell it where to put the resultant files. And we're putting it in app/models/GQL. All right. So one interesting thing about this script that we ran is that you can run it again anytime you want. We're not going to be editing the generated files. This is a very key part of this, because we don't want to be editing something that later gets overwritten, and then, what do you do with all your custom code? We're actually going to be inheriting from the generated code, so we get all of that content and then extending it with our own behavior. So let's see. Cool. So now we need to import the model that was created by this. It has all this awesome functionality built in from our GraphQL schema. And what we want to do with that is, so we're going to want to import the root store base. Think of the root store as the starting point for your application state. Now you can have multiple stores. You can either put them as children to this store, or you can keep them completely separate. This is one of the benefits of MobX state tree. We usually put it as children because it's easy to navigate the tree that way. You can refer from one store to another, etc. But we're importing the root store base from GQL, remember that folder? rootstore.base.ts in this case. And then right here with the root store model, we're just taking the root store base, and then with MobX state tree, you can just say .props and start extending with more props anytime you want. We could do a bunch of more like .props if we wanted to. In this case, we're adding a navigation store that we have already set up in Ignite Browser. It comes with it for free, and it basically stores your current, think of it, if you come from a web background, it's like a route. It's like, where are you routed within this mobile application? We don't have to worry about that too much. One thing to note here, we have types right here, types.optional. Simply tells MobX state tree what types to expect, and it will actually enforce that at runtime. So if you said types.string, it would say this has to be a string, and it's a runtime check. So we both have TypeScript, which is it does type checking statically, when you're building, and we also have runtime types. Very, very cool when you're working with an outside API, because that API is not type checked by you. So you're expecting certain data to come back, and sometimes the backend team will make changes and not tell you. And these runtime types will tell you. They will tell you something has changed. All right, cool. So we've connected that up, and now we want to go to, let's go to the environment.ts. So Ian, yes?
Model missing an end to that deployment.
You need a close bracket and a close bracket on line 12.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we had some, we still have we're missing something with this instance at the bottom. I think that's,
The imports were deleted on line 1.
oh yeah, we have some imports that we're missing. So you need instance, and I think you need, yeah, you need instance, and then go down a little bit, and you need snapshot out. So instance and snapshot out, this is totally irrelevant, but those basically help you generate your TypeScript types. They're just helpers, and it's pretty boilerplate. You just put it in, and you forget about it. Awesome. Okay, so let's go to the environment. So we have these schemas replicated on both sides now, with very few commands and very few changes to the code. But now we need to connect them together. We need to actually make a request from the mobile app back to the API. And so, by the way, really quickly, go to Reactron and refresh so we can show the root store.
Refresh what?
Just refresh the simulator and go to state. By the way, we're showing Reactron just like scratching the surface. Wait for Rich's talk tomorrow, because he's going to go way deep into it, and there's going to be some really cool stuff. Okay, cool. Let's see here. We have a unhandled promise rejection. Those are the worst. Let me see here. So this would be in, just stand by. So it wouldn't be in the Ruby files. We are currently, let's see, root store, model root store base. We're importing that from GQL root store. And we have the navigation store.
The yellow light bulb, is that a warning?
I think that's okay. I think that's okay. And we have our root store model. We're exporting that.
Paths, right? The import paths.
The import path, maybe. Try doing the reset cache on the packager. I don't think this is it, but so in React Native, what you have here, I'll just explain what's going on since I have a little more time now. The packager basically takes your JavaScript or TypeScript bundle and packages it up into one file. Because when you ship a React Native app, it has one file with all your JavaScript, and it will actually read that into memory as it's loading the app. Feels really weird to a web developer. You don't want to do this as a web developer, but a mobile app's a different context. And so the packager tries to cache things so that when you restart it, it's really quick. It doesn't want to have to recompile everything. And so by resetting the cache, As you can see here, it's recompiling everything. It's pulling everything in and you know, translating it from TypeScript and putting it all into one file. And then when you're in development mode, instead of actually putting it into a file, it'll just serve it from a little server, and then it'll. Okay, we're going nuclear on this right now. And so, yeah, okay, we have a real problem, I think, somewhere.
We have a bailout.
We do have a bailout. Let's see, what might we have missed on this? I'm going to just look through my notes very quickly and see where we're at. Actually, how about we go ahead and reset just the React Native side of it, and then make sure it still loads with the React Native side of it reset, and then we will come back to this. Should be pretty quick.
Could we look at the stack trace on like a Safari or something and then
Yes, we can, but this is faster. So, thank you. So one of the areas of focus for the React Native core team has been on error messages. One of the hardest to fix is this unhandled promise rejection, because of the way that it's compiled and put together. It actually it's just hard to track down. Figure out, you know, like the stack trace, where is it coming from? So the stack trace we get is not that useful, unfortunately. So we have to do this kind of old school. All right, so we're getting the same issue. Oh, CocoaPods. And we might want to yarn as well.
Okay.
Yay! All right. So just talking about CocoaPods really quickly, that's actually some Ruby. So Ruby powers the package manager, the de facto package manager for iOS apps. It's called CocoaPods. And that was something, we made some changes and we didn't run pod install. It's like not running bundle when you need to, except for we got a very unhelpful error. All right, let's redo those. Okay, we are going to run the yarn add mstgql line. Run that, and we're going to also add the root store base, or just change the root store base. Cool. Yeah, just go to the root store and basically types.model root store right here. We're just changing that to root store base, and then that auto imported right there. I don't know if Vim does that. Does Vim do that?
Shots fired.
I saw how many Vim developers are here. I said it very quietly. All right, cool. And then we're good on that. Cool. All right, let's move along. Let's refresh. Let's make sure that this is good. No!
Was it the thing we just did?
The root store model?
Undo that one.
Yeah. Okay, so something's going on with the root store model. And we have the latest. Okay, let's rerun the generator.
Okay.
The yarn mst-gql format. Yeah, we're going to run that. We do have a bailout. We can check out the bailout branch and then go through it. I just want to show you how to do this in real time.
And then redo.
And change that to root store model, or sorry, root store base. Okay, yeah, we're definitely getting an issue here. So,
Yeah, maybe it is the pad. Let's see, where are we? Showing sidebar. So we go with that.
GQL. Let's go to the root store base.ts here and just kind of see what we have. I mean, this looks right. This looks right. It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we are going to need to do the bailout here, but luckily we're not that far out from what we were trying to do here. So before we do that, actually, let's go ahead and run through the rest of the code, and then we'll check out the branch. That way people can see the end result. So let's go to the environment.ts and copy and paste in from the README the environment. So we need to, like I said, we need to be able to request to the server and ask for, to the endpoint and ask for our various GraphQL queries, right? So what this does is this takes the create HTTP client, which comes right from MSTGQL. This is the runtime component of it. And we set the HTTP client, we tell it where it lives, localhost 3000/GraphQL, and then it handles it from there. It takes it from there. This environment file gets loaded into the MobX state tree model and gets executed. So, and we can also see that Reactotron is also initialized there. Let's run to the root store context. So this is where we're going to define our custom hooks. We have a, what's there right now, actually, if you roll up to the top for a second, we have create context, which comes from React, okay? If you've used context with React, that's what you use to create a context. We're going to, instead of doing that, we're going to use create store context, which comes from MSTGQL. So this will actually create a context using MSTGQL so that it's aware of all of the different models that we're creating. This is the cool thing about context, is that you can access things wherever you are in your component hierarchy, as long as you wrap it in a provider. We're also going to create a use query right here. Perfect. And so we have a use query, create use query hook. We're passing it the root store context and React as sort of a dependency injection there. And we're exporting it. We're going to be using that in a little bit. Okay, I think that's it for that one. Let's go to the welcome screen. What we have here is, in the welcome screen, is we have a bunch of JSX, okay? It's building that screen that you saw before we had the error. And we are going to add a hook. We're going to, right underneath root store, where we're grabbing our, so this use stores is a custom hook that we built for Bowser. It grabs the store out of the context and lets us refer to any property on the root store. So we could say root store.navigation store. You saw that earlier. We could also do root store.posts. And we would, as long as we've kicked off our query and gotten our query back, it will actually show us all of our posts. We have, it returns back a variety of things. Like any hook, you sort of have like, you can have like a set query. Like we're going to set this query, we're going to kick off this query, but we're not going to do that with this one. We're just going to kick it off right away in the default properties. We pass it in a function, it gives us the store, and we call query posts. That will kick off the query posts GraphQL request to the endpoint, get all of the posts, and bring it back. And query is an object that has a method on it called refetch. So this is if we want to refresh the app and get new data. Pretty simple though. Use query, tell it what we're trying to query, query post. Query post is not something we wrote. That came in through MSTGQL. It was generated. Cool. And then in the JSX portion, we want to replace everything inside of the screen here, all the header, all this text, everything here. And let's just grab it from the README. We have view and array from. Nice, cool. So let me explain what's going on here. So root store.post, remember I said that you can refer to root store.post. We're mapping through that. We're getting a key and the post itself, just represented by P. And then we have a text element. We're giving it a key. We're giving it a style. And we're just simply outputting the post title. Okay. So I wish we could see this. This would be really cool. Just try to imagine it.
It's there.
Whoa.
Whoa! What did we do? Magic.
I'm a developer. I don't know.
It doesn't work and I don't know why. It works and I don't know why. But that's very cool. Okay, we saw our post though, right? Awesome. That makes me feel way better. All right, so we have our data coming from the server and going to the mobile app. This is like wire to wire, going across the GraphQL endpoint, and it's hydrating, which is just a fancy word for filling up our application state using MobX state tree. So, but we want to actually do requests back the other way. Like we want to actually do mutations. Mobile apps are generally not just for consuming. You can also do things with them. So let's run back to Rails for a second here. And let's create a mutation for just deleting posts. This is like the simplest mutation you can do. So Rails G GraphQL : mutation. This is another generator that comes with the GraphQL Ruby gem. And delete post is what we're going to call it. And this will create a file in the app GraphQL mutations folder called, no, it's in the types. App GraphQL types. There is actually okay, yeah, anyway, I'll let you do this. We actually want the mutations file. Yep, perfect. In the delete post here, so there's a bunch of just kind of, just shows you how you can, some example code commented out. We're just going to copy and paste it, and then I'll explain what's going on. So again, a mutation, you take a request, you change something in the database, and then you return back whatever they want. And in this case, what we have is a GraphQL name. It just says this is the name of the mutation. We have a field. This is the response. So we have we're going to be responding with the post that we deleted and a result, a Boolean. We could probably do a little better job than just a Boolean, but in this case, we're just going to do a Boolean, true or false. Did it succeed? And we take an argument of ID. It needs to be an identifier, and it is required. And then we implement. So resolve, we take the arguments, we find, this is just basic active record, post equals post.find, args : ID. So we're grabbing the ID that they gave us, and then post.destroy. You all have probably done post.destroy or something like it in Rails if you've done Rails at all. And then we're returning back a hash that has the post and the result. We're just checking to see if there are any errors. So this is fairly basic Ruby here. Now we need to rerun the GraphQL schema because our schema changed, right? And we don't want to have to go and change it on the mobile app. And here we want to only change it in one spot. So we're going to run our rake GraphQL : dump. We do need that other one as well, but
He's protecting the
so we've now recreated our GraphQL file, and then over on the other terminal, we need to run our yarn mstgql, which regenerates all of these files, and we should now have the mutation, just like that. But let's make sure that we do. So we go back to the React Native side. We go to the root store.ts that we were in before. Now, generally speaking, you're not going to put all this stuff in your root store. You're going to have like stores for different domains. You might have a user store. You might have, a post store, things like that. But you can, if you want, just have a giant root store. There's no reason you can't. So we're adding an action to the root store model because the syntax for deleting a post requires a bunch of other things, and you'll see that in just a second. It's actually not too bad, but we like to create an action. Think of an action as just a method. Actually, if you use Redux, it's like an action and a reducer put together, but it's really just a method. So delete post takes an ID, and then we're calling this mutate delete post. Mutate delete post came directly from mstgql. It was actually generated, and we're taking an input. Ignore that. I know why that is, but we don't need to worry about that. We have an ID. We're skipping the second parameter, and the last parameter is if this succeeds, what do we do? And if this succeeds, we want to take our our MobX state tree model and remove that post from our list of posts because it's been deleted, right? So that's what we do. Cool. Now, what we need to do is create another, in our welcome screen, we need to use another query. 5 minutes? Thank you. We're almost done. Actually, very, very close to done. So we have so we're going to say const, up at the top, right there, underneath the first use query. So the first use query kicks off a request right away. We want to say, let's go get the post, and then when we get the post, let's re-render. This one, we're not going to be doing that. we're just going to have a bare query. It's sort of like use state when you just pass in null or undefined or something. And we're going to, instead of grabbing the query because it's not kicked off yet, we're just going to say we're going to grab the set query. So set query allows us to kick it off at will later on. Cool. And where we're going to do that is in the screen. So in the screen, we're going to, go ahead and copy and paste the expanded version, and I'll explain that. Just grab like the array from part. Yeah, they're perfect. Yeah. So we're just expanding this a little bit. It's all the same stuff. We're just adding a touchable opacity. Just think of it as like a link or a button, which has an onPress. The onPress sets the query to the rootstore.delete post and passes in the post ID. Because when we kick off the query, when we touch the delete button on the post, we need to know which post we deleted or we're deleting. And then at the bottom, we need to make sure that we have the refresh. So replace everything in that safe area view with the button, and then we'll show you all how it works, hopefully. And we should be done. So refreshing over there. Oh, yeah. Create another post. ACR is awesome, which it is. And just hitting the refresh button automatically adds it there. If you click a delete on, so you can see 3 posts there. You delete one of them, refresh over here, and it is deleted. So we have end-to-end fetching data, hydrating our model, kicking off a different request to delete and mutate, and then it refreshes across the board. So as you can see, other than the technical glitches, it wasn't that many lines of code or commands to get this end-to-end. And I've given you the README, which if you go back to slides really quick, you can see that, get.io. We will post these if you watch our Twitter, and you can go check it out yourself. You can check out the repo and try it yourself. We will also have tons of links, the talk itself, as well as MobX State Tree, Ignite Browser, etc. And a few more links from us. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.